Today, trafficking, human trafficking is a global issue. It is not confined to one particular nation or one particular set of nations. It's a global issue that has to be discussed in detail. Trafficking from the womb. Surrogacy plays a major role in terms of human trafficking.
So I work with adult women who are trafficked, but it doesn't mean that we're not aware of all of the different forms of trafficking that can happen. In fact, we know that people can be vulnerable, like you're saying, from the womb all the way to senior citizens, and not just in India or the US, but everywhere around the world. And it's not just about the people, but it's also about the kinds of work that they do. It could be any kind of work. So I think with the surrogacy issue, that's an emerging one. There's a lot more consciousness about it, and something that we're constantly learning about, these different ways that people could be exploited.
And do you understand in the name of NGOs, kids are being sold to the developed nation, especially. Are you?
Children being sold to
Yeah,
different
in the name of
nations.
adoption.
Oh, in adoption, yes, right. So you're following the track of
Yeah, yeah,
womb to
yeah,
childhood.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, sure. Yeah, that's a problem, and in fact, that there's been more coverage about it from the media. Now we are seeing more action on behalf of different places trying to protect those children. Absolutely.
When it comes to Eastern European countries, especially former Soviet Union like Malta, and you see a lot of trafficking in terms of their kids or children, especially women or grown-up women, are forced into sex trade. That traffic is more among these nations. Why it is happening that, and what is the effort from the nation to comply with the problem?
So I think when it comes to trafficking for sex and actually trafficking for labor, what you see is a lot of vulnerability and sort of desperation for people to leave or migrate from their home countries because they're not able to take care of themselves or their families where they're from. So they have to leave in order to support themselves. And when you combine that with a very restrictive migration policy, it means people are going to find another way to migrate. And it could be underground, it could be through criminal networks or other ways that they're vulnerable. And that's when you see the problem. So.
If I ask you to pinpoint one particular reason for all kind of a trafficking, whom do we blame? Do we blame the developed nation, or do we have to blame the poor countries?
I think that we have to not lay a blame, but actually analyze how it's happening, because I think rather than blame, the word I would use is responsibility. We have to be able to educate migrants before they leave, people before they leave, but also after they arrive in the places that they're going, to educate them about their rights. So I think it is absolutely the responsibility of both the source country and the destination.
Don't you see it's kind of a demand and supply?
I don't use those words necessarily, but I do understand. We use push factors and pull factors, and it's the same concept that there's people who need to leave, and then there's people who are willing to pay workers less and pay people less because they're migrants or because they're people of color or because they're women. So in that way, there's a supply and demand issue, but it's also a matter of migration and push and pull, which is a factor in all kinds of trafficking, not just sex.
When it comes to Asia, you have various countries, and this Middle East is one of the great source for many Indians, Bangladeshis, and Pakistan people too. They go as migrant workers. How do you, working with those governments? How does it? Is it easy to work with them, or is it easy to tell them what they are doing is wrong?
It's not easy, I would say, to tell any government that what they're doing is wrong. Obviously, there's the issues of sovereignty that really are important factors to take into account. But your analysis about the migration patterns to the Gulf are really clear to us. In the domestic worker field where I work, we have seen a lot of domestic workers coming from South Asia, Southeast Asia, to the Gulf countries where they're facing a lot of abuse. And part of that is located in the kafala system, which is the sponsorship system that is very restrictive. And so we have joined the International Domestic Workers Federation, which is a group of domestic workers from all over the world. Many of them come come from Asian countries, which do send many workers to the Gulf, and they are actually organizing to try to end the kafala system. So I think there's a role for people to play between governments and those kind of relationships, but also among movements to actually persuade and move governments and others to change policies even when diplomacy might fail.
Okay. And do you really see there is a positiveness towards this particular issue?
I think that there's much more awareness about the abuses that workers are facing, thanks in a lot of ways to the media, who's been shining light on not only the construction workers who are working in Qatar, but also domestic workers in Saudi Arabia, Oman, all of these places, Lebanon. And unfortunately, the sort of severity of the abuses and the lives being lost has actually brought a lot of attention to the issue. And I think most governments want to see the end of this kind of abuse. I think how we do it, how we end the system, is the next battle that we face. I think the awareness is there, but now we have to change
What
it.
about the condition in former Soviet Union countries?
I think everywhere has the same problem. To be honest with you, I can't think of a single country that has completely eradicated human trafficking and slavery. I think each of our countries is in a different phase, and how do we address it? I think as long as we take a rights-based approach, a human rights-based approach that really puts the survivors, the workers in the center of all of our interventions, I think that's when we can get to a better place.
Okay, and another important thing, and when it comes to America, I was talking earlier that it's what when we had a. What about America in terms of their policy towards migrant workers?
So this is something we care a lot about. Many of the domestic workers in the U.S., the household workers, are immigrants or migrants coming from all over the world. And when you have a migration policy or an immigration policy that's very restrictive, it means that people are going to take risks in order to enter. They're going to migrate. People have to migrate in order to live. So what we would like to see changed is more acceptance of immigrants, not only socially, but also legally. So we are part of many campaigns, not just trafficking, but also an immigration reform campaign to actually make it so that there are 11 million undocumented workers in the U.S. And I think that this is to make a change for them. And I think that this is important when you talk about human trafficking, because what we're seeing is that if you're an immigrant worker or a migrant worker, you might be too afraid to go to the police for help if you're undocumented. So in order for us to actually identify more survivors and put them in touch with services, we have to also change the immigration system so that they're more free to be able to complain about their working conditions and get help.
How was Indian scenario? It's very interesting because here the migration workers, migration happens within the state, within the city, from village to towns. It's happening at the micro level, at the macro level. So how do you look at this?
Well, I'm still learning about India. I've only been here for about a week, but what I've heard some really smart, important advocates on the ground here talk about is the need for coordination amongst the different states that where workers are and children are coming from to do this different work. So make sure that they're recognized as human beings first, and their state or where their residency is second. Right, so that everyone is able to access the information and the services and the response, the police response that they need in order to get services. So I think a level of coordination seems to be like the next step in order to meet that need.
Do you see at global level there is a increase in terms of awareness among the trafficking?
Yes, I think so. I mean, there's much more awareness about trafficking. I think what we want to be careful of is that the response or what we're asking for, the interventions, are all rights-based, and they're not more policing or legislation, because I think that only gets you so far. You have to be able to respond to people's needs, what survivors are facing after the rescue, but also the root causes. We have to look at prevention now and figure out what is it about the systems in place, whether it's child welfare system or any kind of system, that makes people vulnerable. I think that's the level that the human trafficking movement needs to go next.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you.